I know it's cutting out.
Put it whack.
It's on. Green lights on.
Just one.
Hello?
Switch over. I might
Hello?
have got another one I can switch you
The event is sponsored by Lake Street Church. What's that come through?
He's gonna get another one, Ron, so maybe you
Well,
can
this
just
is
throw
the
your
other one.
voice.
Right standing in a different part of the room. When you,
Sponsored by Lake Street Church, Peace and Justice, and by Chicago Area Peace Action. We really thank you for coming, and we do have to be out of the room by 8, so we'll stay as long as we can, and enjoy. And Jerome is going to take over if we got a microphone. Here comes Ray. That one working, Ray?
Anyone going? Or they
No, no, well, they
No.
go in, this one's going in and out.
Going, right? There we go. I won't move.
Just one.
Hi, I'm Jerome McDonald. I was with WBEZ for many years. I did the program Worldview from noon to 1. As a point of reference. It's nice to be here, and I've got a couple of things I wanted to tell you about before we get started. Chicago Area Peace Action is having their Peace Summit 2024 on Saturday, April 6th, and that's Saturday, and it's from 10 to 4 p.m. It's an all-day event at Loyola University, and if you've never gone or never heard about it, it's pretty darn interesting. There's terrific panels all day long. You might meet young people if you go. It could be really wild. There's student narratives, informative panels, there's food, there's drinks, cultural performances. It's fun. It's a peace summit. Also, Peace Action is having a satire and social commentary event, Laugh While It's Still Legal, with Tom Nielsen and Lynn Waldron. He is a musician, and he has a slant on social justice and current events. It should be fun. It's happening at McLeish Hall, Lake Street Church. It's a fundraiser for Peace Action, and it'll be towards the end of the month on Friday, April 26th at 6:30 p.m. And there's more information there on the Chicago Area Peace Action website. On to our event and our speakers tonight. I wanted to say a few words about what's happening. I think everyone has been startled, and the news has been galvanized about the World Central Kitchen aid workers that were killed in Gaza. It's been quite a story, and it's good to keep in perspective how many people are dying in this conflict. And of course, it was a war crime for Hamas to attack Israel and kill civilians. But obviously the response has been the dominant factor, and it is disproportionate. And the 7 aid workers are just a fraction of the people who've been targeted by Israel and Gaza. More than 196 aid workers overall have been killed in Gaza since October, according to the U.S.-funded Aid Worker Security Database. So that's there's been more than just the 7 that we've heard about in the news. 627 healthcare workers have been killed by Israeli forces so far, according to the WHO. The Committee to Protect Journalists says that at least 90 Palestinian journalists have been killed since October 7th, alongside 2 Israelis and 3 Lebanese. This is the highest death toll of journalists in any modern conflict that the Committee to Protect Journalists has monitored. Another 25 Palestinian journalists have been detained by Israeli forces. 4 are missing. And probably a lot of you heard the This American Life program recently. If you didn't, it was on last week, and gave some pretty credible voices and credible evidence that Israel's been targeting journalists in Gaza. And we're also going, we also have to recognize children. John Kahler, who's going to speak here, is a pediatrician, has been a pediatrician all his life. More than 12,300 children have been killed in Gaza since October, according to the Gaza Health Ministry, and that surpasses the number killed in conflicts around the world from 2019 to 2022. So, and for anybody who's interested in a really deep dive on it, The website Plus 972 has had a couple of interesting articles on AI and the AI program Lavender that is helping target people for Israeli forces. It's an AI program. They know it's 10% wrong, and they're using it. They're using it to, you know, everybody's been predicting warfare is going to kill people by algorithm, and that is happening now. And there's a very long, detailed analysis of this on the Plus 972 website, and it's a bracing read, and it's detailed, and it's from Israeli soldier testimony. Someone affiliated with Peace Action for many years, David Boris, had a clever idea. He looked at the date and he said, "By gosh, this is April 4th. This is the same day as Martin Luther King's talk at Riverside Church." And that's the talk where he spoke about Vietnam and his opposition to the war in Vietnam. And he agreed with the conveners of that event at Riverside Church that a time comes when silence is betrayal. And he talked about in his remarks about how hard it is to go against your government, about how hard it is when people in your own movement criticize you and say this is not your fight, this is you should keep to your lane, you should do your own thing. But he had a very strong response to that in this speech, and a call to just be human. He said, "Beyond the calling of race or nation or creed is this vocation of sonmanship and brotherhood. And because I believe that the Father is deeply concerned, especially for his suffering and helpless outcast children, I come tonight to speak for them. This I believe to be the privilege and the burden of us who deem ourselves bound by allegiances and loyalties which are broader and deeper than nationalism and which go beyond our nation's self-defined goals and positions. We are called to speak for the weak, for the voiceless, for the victims of our nation, and for those who it calls enemy. For no document from human hands can make these humans any less than our brothers." And it's something to keep in mind as we move on this evening. First, we're going to hear. Second, we'll hear, I'll say, from Jonah Karsh. And Jonah's a lead organizer with IfNotNow Chicago. IfNotNow is a national organization of Jewish Americans who are working to change the situation between Israelis and Palestinians. And he's been deeply involved in organizing and democracy and human rights in Israel, Palestine, and he served on the national board of J Street.
J Street U.
J Street U, the college arm. He's a youthful guy, and we'll be able to hear about some of the college campus experiences that are so in the news these days. First, we're going to hear from John Kahler. John is a co-founder of MedGlobal. I've known him for a bunch of years. He's a pediatrician, has been a pediatrician for many years. He was with Cook County Hospital. He was head of pediatrics at Cook County Hospital for many years. He spent, I think, 37 years at Cook County Hospital, and did some private practice in High Park, and did some work in Joliet and other places. But he's always been involved in humanitarian medical aid, largely in Central and South America. He is friends with Zahir Salul, who was at our event that we had at Lake Street Church a few weeks ago, and knows him, and he became active with the Syria campaign and helping Zahir Salul and many other medical professionals start what was really an alternative healthcare thing for the Syrian opposition during the war in Syria. And I spoke to him when I was on the radio, him and Zahir in Aleppo, when they were being shelled, and it was the final days of Aleppo as an opposition stronghold. So after that experience, he and Zahir and another doctor decided to form MedGlobal about 6 or so, 7 years ago. 2017. So it was an organization that aspired to help people in crisis situations. He's been very involved with Venezuelan refugees in Colombia. He's been helping the Rohingya, and MedGlobal's done a lot of work on the Rohingya issue. And now Gaza, and it's been at the forefront in Gaza. A lot of you probably saw Dr. Tahir Ahmed, who was in the White House yesterday or the day before, and speaking and walking out on President Biden. He was the only Palestinian who even agreed to speak with President Biden, and he went and basically gave him a letter from an 8-year-old girl in Gaza asking him to stop the Rafah campaign, and walked out. And he got a lot of media, and obviously you've seen some of that. And so that's the work MedGlobal's been doing, and John has a short presentation, and then we'll talk, and we'll talk with Jonah.
Thank you so much. We should finish up Dr. King's story because, which everyone in this room knows, the illusion is that he was murdered that night. So this is also the 56th anniversary of his death, which ends up being what happens to people who speak against the government in that way. I want to thank Jonah I want to thank everybody for the invitation. I'll be short because knowing the topic in the past few days, I'm sure, seeing the crowd, I'm sure that there'll be a lot of questions and or commentary from the audience. So I'll be short. I just wanted to put Gaza and our medical presence in Gaza into a little bit of perspective. And this is a greeting from Gaza children. This is from March of this year. I must confess that someone on an interview when I came back said to me, well, with all of this going on, what keeps you hopeful? And my answer was, that presupposes I am hopeful, and I'm not. I'm 77 years old, I'm an old man, and I'm not going to see the end of any of this, but I will dedicate my life to trying to help. I'm not the least bit hopeful. I don't think anything good's going to happen in the next 6 months. So I must bring that perspective to this table. So next slide, please. So for those of you who don't know, this is just, Gaza is 26 miles long. So those of you who are marathoners or who were marathoners could run this in however many hours you run a marathon in. So 26 miles long, about 5 to 7 miles at its widest. Gaza City was where we set up our program. MedGlobal's had a program in Gaza since 2018, 2019. We set it up in Gaza City. Most of the people in Gaza City have never been to Rafah. Rafah was, Rafah's in the south, it's on the ocean. People would go down there and take a break. It is the crossing. Eretz, where it says come out at one hospital, Eretz crossing from Tel Aviv is on the top, and where it says Rafah crossing into Egypt is on the bottom. Most of the Palestinians who would leave would have to go through Rafah crossing. Take them hours. The West Bank, obviously, they crossed into Jordan. No one went up through Eretz. Next slide, please. So this is a little different perspective, and I wanted to make sure that everyone in this room understands this perspective, because this tells you a little bit about the concentration. Rafah itself is about 26 square miles. This is the Rafah government. It's broken in. Gaza's broken into the Gaza government, the middle government, which is Bahirab, and Khan Yunis, and into Rafah. Rafah is about 26 square miles. On 10/6/23, there was about 10,000 people per square mile. When I was there in March, there was 50,000 people per square mile. The size of it is, if you take Evanston and Wilmette and double it, you get about the physical size of it. 5 times the concentration in 3 months. This is one of the largest displacements that's in modern history. People say, well, what's different with this than the Rohingya or anything else? Well, you see down the bottom where you see Egypt and Rafah, that is as far as people can go. That is a hard wall, no one gets through it. That's one of the things that, as you hear about the Rafah assault, They're 5 kilometers away. There's 1.2 to 1.4, depending on who tells you this figure, million people jammed into that right now. One other bit of perspective for those of you who are international travelers, Rafah can be put inside the perimeter of Istanbul Airport. That's the size of it. And there's 1.3 million people in there. Next slide, please. So, when I was in Gaza, I wanted to say 3 things, and I'll end up quickly. The reason I put this up there is I was privileged in March when I went back in to go north. So when you heard this begin in October, the IDF said everybody's got to get south of Wadi Gaza. Wadi Gaza separates the upper from the middle and the lower third. One pediatrician, so this was the attack on Shifa Hospital, the attack on Kamal Adwan Hospital. Kamal Adwan was the major pediatric hospital. You may have remembered that as Shifa was being attacked and finally abandoned, there was one pediatrician who held the fort down in Kamal Adwan Hospital. Dr. Hassan al-Safiya, this is him. He's a hero. I was permitted, one UNICEF worker and myself were permitted to go north of Wadi Gaza when I was there in March. The reason we went north was to set up a nutrition supplementation station. I'll talk a little bit about nutrition in a minute, but I just wanted to put this up there because this is a true hero. The other thing is that as bad as things are in the south, they're 10 times worse in the north. What you see him handed, this is a box. I brought 4 boxes of special formula. I might as well have been bringing manna from heaven. They were so happy with this. These would have been gone by the time I left. These have 100 calories for them. These are special formulas, high intensity formulas. This is for little children who are starving. Okay, next slide, please. This is Kamal Adwan. This is what happens. This was from the first attack, not the second one. This was from the first attack. There's still, by the way, for those of you who wonder, there's still anywhere between 500,000 and 600,000 people left in the north. So the question becomes, somebody said to me, so where? And the truth be known, I don't know. When we came north of Wadi Gaza, you go along, like going along Lakeshore Drive, right? I mean, it's a nice area. You travel right along. It used to take me, when I was there before, it would take me a half hour to get from Gaza City to Al Nasser Hospital where I worked. It took us 2.5 hours to get there. The roads are blowing up. Every single solitary building north of Wadi Gaza is either destroyed or is either flattened or blown up. You get into the city and you start seeing people mill around, but you look, it's an old city, and you look, and here's these huge buildings, and there's nobody on the street. There's no lights, there's nobody on the street, there's 3 or 4 people walking, the buildings are all blown out. It's dystopia. I've been in Haiti after the earthquake. I've been in Yemen. I was in Aleppo during the siege, and I thought I was ready. When I went in, I thought I was ready. I said, hey, I've seen a lot of, I'm an old man, I've seen a lot of stuff, I can handle this. I've never been shocked the way I was. Dr. Hassan came with us in January, and he'll tell you, when we went in, when we got across the border and went in, it was night. The only thing showing was flashlights, the cell phone lights, and fires. And to that end, Rafah was founded in, I don't know, 1418 or something like that. Rafah's old. And so think about an old Mideastern city. There was nothing there but people walking. I've never seen anything like that in my life. And from the second I stepped in, I was touched to this moment on what that looked like. So next slide, please. So the next slide, please. So when I was at Kamal Adwan, this is the second trip in, 2 babies had died that day. These are newborns. One's a week old, one's 3 weeks old. They were in a bassinet. Okay, this was the day of their death, and these are their medical records. One died of sepsis. Dr. Akros, I have to talk about sepsis because she's a pediatric intensive care doctor, so I have to make sure she knows. One died of sepsis, one died of prematurity, and inability to get enough nutrition to live. Now, we see death, Jerome mentioned the statistics. I mean, there's probably close to 40,000 people, 33,000 identified, 7,000 buried. Next, go back one slide, please. See if you can get back. Because I want to show you something. If you can't,
Yeah, come on.
yeah, 6. Let's go to 6. That one right there, yeah. So this is the area directly above that bassinet. This is these are monitors. And when the IDF came into Kamala One Hospital, they shot the monitors. So I'm not sure what the purpose of that was, but this is right below that outlet are those 2 babies. So next slide, please. Next one. It's a little girl that was, we opened when I was there in January, we opened a primary health center. At the primary health center in the middle of Rafah itself, we saw between 600 and 700 patients a day in a room this size. And for all of those of you who are in the medical profession, every one of those patients were registered. So you want the hardest job in the world? Try registering, be at the registration station, 600 or 700 patients in a room this size. Everyone was sick. Every little child under 6 months of age had either diarrhea. And I thought, well, I'm a pediatrician. Jerome mentioned I've been a pediatrician for longer than a whole long time. And how many times have I dealt with diarrhea? How easy is this, right? So I sat down, and the first time I was through my translator, I was going to give my diarrhea talk. And then I said, well, let me open my mouth and take my damn foot out of it, because every single solitary thing I would tell that mother to do, she couldn't. She didn't have enough Pampers, so she can't keep the diaper off. There was no heat in her tent, where there were 20 people. So she couldn't leave the bung open. She couldn't clean it because there was no clean water. She couldn't put any cream on it because there was no cream. And God forbid, she would have trouble with any special nutrition because there was no nutrition. And she was having a hard time breastfeeding because the most significant cause of breastfeeding incompetence is stress. And my God, 100% of these people are either hungry or under stress. So every single solitary thing I thought I could say was worthless. And every kid was sick. Next slide, please. So, in service of what's happened the past few days, let me mention 2 things. One is, let me pay tribute to my colleagues that were killed. They're not the only ones. I mean, Jerome mentions hundreds and hundreds of aid workers were killed. Most of them worked for UNRWA, which means they were Palestinian, which means no one gives a damn about them. Let alone do they not. There is a specific attempt to blow them up or shut them down. So that's where most of them were. But here's 7, and I don't have to. Somebody said to me, well, you were in Ukraine. What's the difference between what happened in Ukraine with the refugees and what's happening here? And I said, I'm assuming you're asking me that question in earnest, because if you're not, I can hear you with your tongue planted firmly in your mouth. It's, of course, the color of this thing. These are brown people that are being killed. And now suddenly, we've got a wonderful array here of non-brown people. Very important. Please do not think that I'm downplaying. This could have been me. There's this concept called deconfliction, which means every morning when we got up, both when I was there in January, John will talk about this, both when I was there in January, when I was there in March, every morning you get up, you have to call, you have someone that does this, you give the IDF your destination, your time, your route, for how long. And they put it into some AI computer, and you're hoping it's not some 16-year-old playing a game and adding these figures by mistake. And anybody who wonders whether they really works or not, it just so happened when we got in January, the internet suddenly went down for 8 days, right? No connections. other than at the UN and the UNICEF. And at that time, there was still some walking room between our office and the UNICEF, and I was there. So I went there to use the computer. There's a soft curfew at 6 o'clock. There's a hard curfew at 8. At 6:15, I got a note on our Garmin from my medical director that said, you need to get back here because I just got notified that you're not where you're supposed to be. That's how that's how well they keep track of where the hell you're supposed to be at. And I'm nobody. And they knew where I was supposed to be, and they were able to know who to tell if I wasn't. So the concept at the World Central Kitchen, that 3 vehicles, 2 armored, and they had just, by the way, I don't know if you know the story. They had just, next slide, please. They had just gotten in. They've been trying for months. They've been in for almost 6 months, trying to get in now. They just got their 2 armored vehicles in, so they're very proud of themselves. Suddenly, when we went north, I happened to go with a UNICEF in a UN 2-car convoy, and both cars were armored. All right. And they were very proud, World Central Kitchen was very proud of themselves. They had just gotten their armored vehicles. They had one that was unarmored, one they call it soft. They had a soft vehicle and 2 armored vehicles. So very proud of themselves. They had also set up, World Central Kitchen has special relationship both in the United States as well as with Israel, right? And one of the things that happened was they were able to set, this lunacy of airdrops and this lunacy of a pier that was beginning to get set up. They were able to set a jetty up, essentially. Now, what no one says, and God bless Chef Andres, these kind of, I'm sure Jay will talk about it in a second. This pier, by the way, and this jetty is built on the bones of dead Palestinians, because it is the rubble of Gaza. No one has cleaned it up, and suddenly, because we couldn't get any equipment in there when this was going on, and God forbid we might have been able to save somebody under the rubble. But now suddenly, when we're going to put a jetty up, and there's going to be this wonderful humanitarian getting food in, which was a good thing. We're able to clean this up and throw it in the water, which means it's built on the bones of dead Palestinians. So this is so you see the line, the diagonal line that breaks off North Gaza from Deir al-Balah. That is Wadi Gaza. World Central Kitchen was right at the ocean at that. That was their main site. The warehouse they were at is inside that, between Rafah and there, and they were going well coordinated from there to the ocean road, to go back up to the World Central Kitchen main site. And for those of you who don't know, and I'm sure everyone in this room probably does, I'll just repeat it. They were hit 3 times. The armored vehicle was hit first, and what probably should have happened is they should have stayed in. But they abandoned that vehicle, called the IDF and said, "You're shooting us. You know we're here." So all of this bullshit about not knowing they're there is crazy. They called it, they have a direct line saying, "You know we're here." No answer. So they moved from car 1 into car 2. That car was hit. They call again and say, "Stop shooting us," to no avail. They then emptied car 2 into car 3, and the car 3 was the soft one. That one was hit and everyone was killed. That went along, for anyone who wonders whether it was a mistake, that was along 2 kilometers of that road. And if you see the picture, the World Central Kitchen, the one that they were riding in when they were killed, has the logo on the top, and there's a missile shot right through the sea. God forbid, as if somebody were aiming. I would not. I don't know that. Next slide, please. This is World Central Kitchen. This is their site. This is where they were coming back to. We stopped on our way north there, and I know how popular Chef Andres is. I said, "I got to get a picture of this." And even I have to get a picture of this. I mean, I can use this as my brush of greatness. We, by the way, came and did, we being MedGlobal, our country team came and did a medical assessment when this program opened up. So we were lucky enough to be able to be in that group. Next slide, please. So one of the things everybody wonders about is last night with, so there's two things I want to talk about. One was the World Central Kitchen, but also there'll be questions about Dr. Ahmed's decisions to leave the White House. So let's hear him tell it himself.
I was able to share that with the president and let him know that out of respect for my community, out of respect for all of the people who have suffered and who have been killed in the process, I need to walk out of the meeting.
أنا بايد تخلصين الحق أنا بايد
We need our hospitals to be able to stand. We need the bombs to stop dropping, hopefully through a ceasefire.
Dr. Ahmed is a true moral hero. It's easy when it's easy. So I could sit here and yell about everything I want to yell in front of you. You're my friends. I don't know who else is in here, but I can do that easily. I can have righteous indignation while I'm standing here. He stood in front of the President of the United States and said, to honor my people, I must leave. That's Martin Luther King level moral clarity. That compass is pointed due north for him, and God bless him for it. Okay. Next question. All right. Since this is out of the rubble, I guess I just wanted to add my 2 cents before I turn it over to the expert on this. As I mentioned earlier, I'm not the least bit hopeful. There is no question in my mind that this is the long-term plan. This is the inflection point. How it came and why it came and what was the tinder that started it is not the issue tonight. And just for the record, let me state, bring the hostages home. The hostages don't belong anywhere other than back home. October 7th was an abomination. Bring the hostages home. Afterwards, there's 2 things. They talk about the infrastructure. Well, open up the gates and I'll cure the malnutrition problem in 3 months. We won't need anything else. I can throw a rock and hit the food on the other side of the Egyptian border. So this is not a difficult issue. Don't drop it by the air. Don't bring it in by sea. Open up the gates and that'll be taken care of. Open up the gates and give me enough stuff and I can build houses, I can build hospitals. I can rebuild that. That's pretty simple, right? But what I can't do, and what is really being intact, is I can't give people back agency, dignity, and integrity. That's the cleansing and ethnic cleansing, in case anybody wants. The bombing can stop this evening, And anybody that was in a 3-year program, be it a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer, has got no place to go back to. The buildings are blowing up, the professors have been killed, no place to go back to. So this is the infrastructure that we have to work on. The universities in the United States need to open up programs to bring these kids there to finish up their education, irrespective of what the caveats are for when they're done. We owe them that. We stood there and pretended we cared since October the 8th. Biden comes up today with some vanilla ask to Netanyahu. We owe them that. We need a ceasefire, and we need to help rebuild agency dignity and integrity. Those are the things that are being stripped. Because if that doesn't happen, and God forbid, Al-Aqsa Mosque is closed down on the last day on Eid, and the West Bank goes up. I just got back from Beirut. I've never, as many years as I've been going to Beirut, the folks I talked to, I've never seen them more scared than they are right now. The last time the airport was bombed, they could go into Syria. They could leave. They had other places to go. All of that's closed. So all that's got to happen now is the West Bank go up in flames, the lunatics from Hezbollah start shooting rockets, the Israelis will take care of that. And I said to an old comrade of mine, old colleague of mine in Beirut, who was talking about all this, I said, oh, come on now. It's not like they go, and as soon as I got to not like they go, I thought, why am I going to say anything that they're not going to do? They'll do whatever they want. Because right now, even during we need a ceasefire, we need all that, we do. But my fear is that, and I haven't heard what Netanyahu said after today's little encounter. My fear is that the IDF has gone rogue, and they are the monster to our Dr. Frankenstein. And that's my concern. So thank you.
Repeat that, please.
I said that they are the monster to our Dr. Frankenstein. Remember, it wasn't Frankenstein, it was Frankenstein's monster that caused all the problems. It was Frankenstein that thought he could control it and couldn't. That's my big word. Thank you.
Thank you. Some of your colleagues are here tonight?
Chandra Hassan is a surgeon that went with us.
Do you want to say something?
Dr. Hassan was a surgeon that went with us to Gaza. Dr. Noor Akras is a colleague of mine, a pediatrician, who went with us to Yemen on our first trip to Yemen. Also, by the way, I must add, I forgot to add, a published author about her humanitarian work. So, yes,
I want to hear what you guys think. Do you want to say something about your experience? We'll just get the raw stuff. You didn't have time to think about this.
Thank you, everyone. I was in Gaza with Tahir. In January, we stayed there for 3 weeks. As he mentioned, nobody was prepared to see what we saw. I've been to Ukraine. I was in Odessa when Russians were at Kherson, 120 kilometers from there. Usually you get a missile alert after the missiles land because we're too close. So that was not even frightening compared to what we went through in Rafah. We had a guest house. The first night, as we went in, all we could see is through the headlights of the van, the exodus of people. It was cold, dark night, people wandering around aimlessly, children, men, women, no food, no water, no shelter for them. And the first thing John told was, this could be how a post-apocalyptic world might look like. People were crying. It was quiet in the van. Everybody in the car started crying because nobody was prepared to see such things. And the constant noise of gunfire and bombing that shakes your building nonstop. If you're here by now, we would have heard like at least 10,000 bullets fired, 10 or 15 F-15 bombs around, tank shelling, drones. I'm not ballistic expert, but we could differentiate after being there for so long. We could differentiate the noise of each bomb. When we see the patients, we could say what kind of weapons has been used on them. So when we left, one thing that came to our mind, after seeing all the children being like, these bombs create such blast waves. You might have seen Soul of My Soul, a grandpa holding a granddaughter. There's no external wound in these children. They are 3 years old, 5 years old, 8 years old. They all look like they're sleeping, just covered in the concrete dust. Only thing is, the blast waves ruptures the internal organs. They die instantly. And parents bring their 5 kids, 6 kids, and they plead against hope. Can you check one more time? At least one of my child is alive. I could take home. And none of these children are counted because they wrap them up, they tell a prayer, they take them away. We were in Khan Yunis in Nasser Hospital during the heaviest bombing time at the period. And there's nobody counting these dead children or dead people. Only those who are counted are people who goes through to a morgue or who die from the ICU or in the hospital. And we were doing like amputations without anesthesia. We are placing chest tubes without anesthesia. And we had people who, we've had witness to all those things. The people who bleed out, which would never happen here. And the people who sent to the CAT scan, they come back dead. And it's like never ending. It's not like one mass casualty event we expect to handle in Chicago once a year or once in a few years' time. This happens every hour, every other hour. And in a hospital where there's no facilities, there's no supplies, no food, no water. And when you do operations, we use the normal saline to just clean your forearm, and then you just do the operation without even tap water running to clean yourself. And when you operate, the operating room windows keep shaking from the bombs. So when it came to the point, they bombed a block, a building across the street, and we felt that shrapnels hitting the hospital wall, and the MedGlobal leadership decided that we be evacuated the next day morning. With a heavy heart, we left there, and then 2 days later, we ended up in Al-Aqsa Hospital. I never saw so many children with such horrific burn wounds. These are 3rd-degree burn wounds, and there's a child, his face was completely burned, and his both arms were burned, both hands, so he couldn't eat. And his sisters had less burn wounds, but more fractures. And these 3 children are among 17,000 children. There's a new classification there, wounded children with no surviving family. So where are these children going to go? At least at the time we thought, how worse can it get? And at least at that point, we were getting 1 meal a day. Now, it's not even available there. Now, Judah came with you, and he survived with the cans of tuna and chicken he took with him for 3 weeks. He stayed in the hospital. I'm sorry I'm telling you some graphic things, but that is the reality there, what they are living through. And when we left the Rafah, one thing that came to us, how do we summarize this? Whatever name they want to call it, massacre, genocide, I don't know. But when you see a 6-month pregnant woman come to the hospital and we resuscitate on a cold concrete floor, no bed, no bed sheet, no mattress, we give IV fluid, and then they get up and go. And suddenly you have in this place, like this place up to here, there will be like 35 people brought in. Your back is to the wall. How do you intubate somebody? You can't ask for any help to anybody. You do whatever you can. You want to put a chest tube, you want to intubate. And we don't have time to clean the instruments. And we can't even have a whole scalpel because that's considered as dual use, so that's being banned. So you just use the blade, the very tip of the blade. So that's not the right way to hold it, right? You can cut yourself too. And things like that. When you wonder what else can go wrong or more get worse than this, 3 weeks after we left Nasser, the hospital was bombed. There's no electricity, no water. They blow up everything in the hospital. It's non-functional. That floor where we're resuscitating dozens of people every day, that's full of sewer now. So when you think it can't get worse, they make it worse. So what we summarize when we got out of Rafah is they perfected the cruelty. Thank you.
That was really powerful. We're going to slip over to our next speaker, Jonah Karsh. And Jonah's been a lead organizer, like I said, with IfNotNow Chicago. And he's been involved in organizing for democracy and human rights. You know, we wanted to have someone here who could kind of navigate this as a Jewish American, as someone who has lived this his whole life. Can you tell us a little about yourself and your journey, and just get us acclimated to who you are?
Sure. Is this working? Can you hear me? Yeah. It does. It is. There's a red light, so I'm afraid the battery's low.
And thank you for being good with technology. All the young people are.
Digital natives, right? Well, first of all, really, really moving testimony from everybody, and I mean, I had the tremendous honor of being part of a solidarity delegation to the West Bank with Jewish Americans, Canadians, British people, with the Center for Jewish Nonviolence, which builds relationships with Palestinians in the West Bank, in the Masafer Yatta region in particular, which is an area of small villages, mostly next to settlements, under constant threat of demolition, ethnic cleansing, displacement, frequent encounters with the army, and it's really an opportunity and a tragedy to see apartheid up close when you're there, to see a settlement that has running water, electricity provided by the Israeli government, the protection of the army, the ability to vote for the government that controls their lives, and then maybe the distance from this wall to that wall, there are Palestinians living in tents with none of those things. Who, if they try to build something else, by the way, would lose the building permit and would get demolished. So when I was there, I was at a nonviolent protest, a weekly protest led by some of the activist community leaders in the villages that was violently suppressed. And I was on the ground, pushed to the ground by a soldier, and then they threw a stun grenade right next to me. And I had a panic attack and I ran away. And it just feels pretty trivial compared to what these doctors, what the people in Gaza have been experiencing. So I feel like a coward compared to these people. I feel like, I don't know why I'm on this panel, but it's an honor to speak as a Jewish American as well. So I was born in Chicago, Northwestern Hospital, lived in Edgewater until I was 5, moved to Evanston where I was raised. I consider myself an Evanston person, so great to be at the library here. As many Jewish families are, there's a range of views and experiences in my family around Israel-Palestine and in my community. So my rabbi growing up was a man named Brant Rosen at the Jewish Reconstructionist Congregation. When I was about 8 years old, he sort of publicly broke with Zionism, I think becoming the first sort of mainstream congregational rabbi in the United States to do that, outside of some Orthodox sects, that were doing that. And I don't think I was old enough to understand what that meant, but it wasn't seen as an abnormal thing. It was just, hey, my rabbi, he's a great guy, he was great with kids, we had a close relationship that had nothing to do with politics, just because he was really good with kids. My parents, I would say, were anti-occupation, sort of progressive Zionist camp, and I would say they've both moved to being a little more agnostic on the question of Zionism, meaning whether there should be a Jewish majority state called the State of Israel on that land with privileges for Jews and not for non-Jews that are in that state. My uncle was the United States ambassador to Israel under the Obama administration, and he now works in the Defense Department under the Biden administration. And I would say his politics on Israel are Joe Biden's politics on Israel, and his daughter, my cousin, who I love, but why it's been very hard, became an Israeli citizen, joined the IDF, finished her service, I guess, call it what you want, and was sort of traveling the world, going around the world, and then October 7th happened, and she was called back and was working as a paramedic. So if she was going to do anything, I'm thankful that she's a paramedic. She was safe, thankfully. She's not doing it anymore, but I remember one time when I visited Israel, the first time I visited Israel was essentially like a birthright trip, but it was a family reunion at my uncle's house, the ambassador's residence, which is the most expensive piece of real estate in Israel. And it was basically like a birthright trip with armed guards. We were going around in his Suburban, seeing all the sights, and I was 12, and I thought, this is okay, nice place, I don't know. We didn't really have many encounters with Palestinians, and my parents, when we got back home, really underlined that fact for me. And I think that was a moment when I think I noticed my consciousness start to raise. Another moment was when Brant Rosen, amid heavy criticism of Israel's 2014 assault on Gaza and that war, left JRC. Some would say he was pushed out of JRC by members that were upset with the stances that he was taking on the issue. And again, I'm not sure I had a strong opinion one way or another, but I'm like, wow, Israel-Palestine is something that people have really strong feelings about in my congregation, and this rabbi that I love is leaving, and I was sad about that. Then I went back to Israel, and when I was for my cousin's bat mitzvah towards the end of the Obama administration, I once again spent a lot of time at the ambassador's residence. And on that trip, my immediate family, my parents and my younger brother and I, spent a day in the West Bank with a friend of a friend in the city of Nablus. And I can't say that I saw the occupation up close, or I wasn't astute enough in what I was seeing to see it up close. There was clearly a difference in quality of life, but I wouldn't have said, oh, this is intense military repression. I do remember being driven in and having to go through the checkpoint, and our driver, who was an Arab, even though he had an Israeli license plate, was stopped and had to get out of the car, and we were kind of milling around for half an hour while they did whatever they wanted to do. But it didn't quite hit me. And then I am a musician. I was a band kid in high school and decided to study music in college, wanted to be a professional jazz pianist. And I went to the University of Miami in Florida, which is not Evanston, decidedly not Evanston. And particularly that's the case in how the Jewish community talks about Israel. So whereas I grew up with a rabbi who was an anti-Zionist and a member of Jewish Voice for Peace, a very prominent anti-Zionist organization, the rabbi at my Hillel said that Jewish Voice for Peace was an anti-Semitic organization. And I was I expected it to be different, but there was some major culture shock for me. And long story short is I was connected to an organizer with this group J Street U, which I would say politically I've moved to the left of, as have many J Street and J Street U alumni, both in recent months and in recent years. And worth noting that IfNotNow was actually prominently founded by a lot of J Street U alumni who were upset with J Street's stance on the Gaza war, but that's a whole of 2014, but that's a whole another story. Long story short is that I was encouraged to have conversations on a campus of 2,000 Jews. There have to be some people that feel the same way that I do. And I started going up to Jews on campus and asking them to talk about Israel, which is a pretty awkward thing to do. But I really was searching for political community that I kind of took for granted growing up, and I didn't have it at University of Miami, and I was thinking about transferring. And thankfully, I found not just Jewish students, but eventually just progressive students that were looking for any sort of progressive activism on campus. I remember I went to the activities fair my freshman fall, and I went to the table with the college Democrats, and I said, is there anything else progressive to do on campus? And they said, it's a good question. The answer was they couldn't think of anything. So believe it or not, on that kind of campus, it's really all there was. So our organization attracted Jews, but it attracted progressive students that were looking for a place that felt genuinely progressive to them. And eventually, it attracted Palestinian students as well. And it became a place where we had conversations, where the only place on campus where Jews and Palestinians were talking to each other, having honest conversations about the occupation, And I was proud of learning how to build power, how to shift dynamics on my campus, how to get the college Democrats, which were previously very aligned with the APAC chapter on our campus, to become more aligned with a validly anti-occupation position. And as I was spending more and more time doing that, less and less time practicing the piano, I realized I was spending my time where my heart was, and that I wanted to continue organizing in a Jewish progressive context for my career. And so was fortunate out of school to spend a year working at the Jewish Council on Urban Affairs, which does state and local organizing in the Jewish community in Chicago in coalitions led by those most impacted by issues. That was a great opportunity to get introduced to some of the Chicago Jewish left. That was just a year-long sort of fellowship placement. I'm only 23, so since then I'm looking for the next full-time landing spot, but I've remained very active. I wanted to find an Israel-Palestine organizing space. I graduated from school. I went on this delegation to the West Bank, and one of the things that one of the Palestinian men in one of the villages, one of the leaders we were talking to, said, "It's really great that you're here, but what we need you to do most is to go back to your country and put pressure on your government, because they're the people that can change this." And I can't ignore that. And so there have been times when I felt like, Israel-Palestine is so emotionally exhausting. Do I really want to keep organizing on this? But it just keeps drawing you back in. And after October 7th, sort of a blessing and a curse that I was both unemployed, but I also had a lot of time to devote to organizing with IfNotNow, which is now my movement home, a movement of mostly young but multi-generational American Jews that have worked very closely with Jewish Voice for Peace, worked very closely with Palestinian organizations in Chicago on envisioning a permanent ceasefire, a release of the hostages, of course, and a solution to Israel-Palestine that ends Israel's apartheid system and guarantees a future of justice and equality for everyone that lives between the river and the sea. And so that's what I've been fortunate to be doing.
I'm going to ask you a question about generational change and the ability for generations to change. And when we were talking with Zaire Salul, he said, it's not just Jewish people, it's older people like Joe Biden who spent their entire careers, they're entirely invested in being pro-Israel. It's just part of the genetic code. And for so many, people, for a lot of Christians in this country, do you believe that people, this is such a cataclysmic event, really. I don't, we're kind of in the middle of it, and I don't think we appreciate the next of it, and we can't even understand the next of it. My friend Rashid Hadi, you ask him what's next, he's like, I have no idea. And so, we have the whole political landscape of Palestinians is obliterated. So so I'm sorry to ask you this unanswerable question, but do you believe older people can change and want something different? And bear in mind, these people might storm you if you think.
I mean, I hope so. I think you mentioned, Doctor, that you're not feeling hopeful. I think I've heard this quote of Antonio Gramsci repeated a lot since October 7th, which is pessimism of the intellect, optimism of the will. Another version of that would be the great black feminist thinker Adrienne Marie Brown, who says that hope is a discipline. So in other words, okay, maybe your brain tells you that, okay, it's probably not going to work, but what are you going to do about it? Are you just going to then let the outcome that you fear the most happen, or are you going to get up and fight for what's right? And so if I didn't believe, I don't really know. I'm gonna try. And I think that obviously, people that are younger tend to be more impressionable and more easily influenced. But I've seen with my parents, oftentimes it's a very Jewish thing to have a lively dinner table, raised voices debate about Israel. And I've been in many, and oftentimes, my parents, my grandparents, whoever I'm talking to get defensive, and then particularly with my parents, a month or two later, they'll say, you know what, actually, you kind of convinced me about that. And, when someone's challenged, I think their first instinct is to get defensive, but then it stays with you. and you're like, oh, why did I react that way? You know, maybe there's something to what's being said. And so I can't have contempt for the people that I'm trying to organize. You know, the only way we win is by growing the movement. So I try to maintain hope in that. Yeah, Doctor?
Yeah, please. Let me, thank you very much. And as an old person who trying to change, I'll speak to that. I made a mistake so I came back after the first, in January. And this speaks to how one changes. I came back after the first stint in January, and it was about a week to maybe 10 days afterwards. And I was doing an interview with the BBC. And they asked me something, I forget what it was, but they ended up saying, are the people there afraid? And I said, I thought for a second, and then I stuck my foot in my mouth and said something like, think of yourself in 1600 Europe. You're in a small village, the Huns are coming, you know they're 5 kilometers away, but you don't know what they're gonna do. I said, well, in this situation, this is the foot goes in the mouth. In this situation, I said, the barbarians are at the gate. And I was done with it. And the second I hung up, I got a call from a PR person that was on there with us, and I said, you don't have to say anything. I realized I was stupid with that. The only good thing was I didn't mention the word crusade anywhere in there, so at least I did all right on that one. But I stayed up every night for the next weeks thinking, I've done this before, I've done this a lot. Well, how could I do that? I mean, I came back as moved as I've ever been. How could I do that? And then it dawned on me in the middle of the night one night, I woke up and I realized, I've only been back 10 days, and I'm moving this experience from my heart to my head. Once it's in my head, we can have a dialectic about it. You know, you can tell me, you know, two-state solution will work. I can tell you why it will. I can tell you all these things. It's in my head, and it's a dialectic, and it's no longer there. And I said, I can't let this happen. I have to go back now. And that's when I went back in a couple of weeks to jam that thing back down. This is how you change. I'll tell any, you know, we had a discussion about whether or not we should have been at the White House or not. That's not for tonight. But what I would tell every congressperson that exists, come with me. Walk in there. Sit there for 5 minutes and then go back out if you want. American Academy of Pediatrics contacted me about, do we have a registry or something? And I said, you know what? No, we don't. But why don't put a delegation together and get done with these damn vanilla effects of war on children. Was anybody in this room think the effects of war on children is good? I mean, it's ridiculous. But the way one changes, anybody that walked in there with me and sat for an hour at a shelter with one bathroom for 300 people and had to go to the bathroom and was cold and it's night, do it one time and tell me this has to do with Hamas. One time. And if you don't change that, I don't know what to say. I mean, if you don't change that, I have absolutely no idea what to say. Thank you.
Okay, questions, folks? We don't want to hog all the time. We're not short. Hello, ma'am.
A simple, easy question. What is the title of the book that your colleague wrote, you referred to earlier?
Oh, I have to get it for you. I apologize. I'm glad she left, but I'm quite embarrassed that I can't give her a title after that. One time of my own trip. By the way, if you're looking for a book, if somebody's looking for a book that tells a good story and has the history, pick up A Day in the Life of Abdel Salama. 100 Years of War on the Palestinians by Rashid Khalidi will give you the information you need.
A Day in the Life of Abed Salama.
Yeah.
ABED space SALAMA. It's by fantastic journalist, author, scholar named Nathan Thrall.
Yep.
And he has also got a great essay collection called The Only Language They Understand, which was very influential on my thinking about sort of the political dynamics.
It's a fantastic book. I mean, it's an easy read. It's written by a journalist, so it's actually written well.
It's amazing. Let's see, there is so. That could be said for any of us in the room. Thank you for your incredible passion and ability to tell that story. I, as a therapist, am wondering, is there anybody working on the trauma effect there for not only the people in Palestine?
Well, it's a fantastic question because people say, what about PTSD? And I say there's no P. This is ongoing traumatic stress. And in point of fact, we are setting up a program. It's a community-based, narrative-based, community-led program. 100% of people are affected. So in these shelters, there's 7,000 people in a school. There's 7,000 people in here, right? 40 people to a classroom, one bathroom, the whole story. You know their story. What we're doing is we're going in and we're saying one of the things that attack the integrity and the agency is your narrative, right? This is Frantz Fanon, so this is nothing new to me. The colonial mindset eats your narrative. It's called de-storying. It takes your story away. So what we're doing is we're going into the shelters, and we're using, so the other thing I should add, by the way, just as an aside, as a young man, I would have had ADHD, so please forgive me if we're on 5 lanes going at one time, all right? I'll try to wrap it up at some time. But what I do want to say is that in the South, civil order is holding. The only way civil order is holding is because of emergent leadership. Someone's holding it together. It's the glue that holds a society under stress together. We're trying to tap into those leaders, not the ones who come up to you and say, how much antibiotics did you bring me? But the ones behind them who are really holding this together. So we have medical access points that are run by Palestinians who have been displaced and haven't been paid a penny since October 1st, who are setting these access points up. Same way with education. There are teaching going on. It's those leaders that we are engaging to help lead community. We did it, we set up, we got 40 people there in one night. It was music to the heart. A jazz pianist will appreciate this. It was music to the heart because 3 of the women came up afterwards. And this was just a 1-hour breathing, re-storytelling, 1 hour. And they came up afterwards and they said, we got to thank you because for 1 hour the war wasn't there. For 1 hour it wasn't there. So we are trying to address it. People think of mental health and they think of therapy, right? Well, there aren't enough therapists to, there were 2 psychiatrists, by the way. There were 2 psychiatrists in Gaza prior to this. 2. Now there's schizophrenia, there's anxiety, those things exist, right? But 100% of the people are affected by this crisis. And this is who we're trying to tap into right now. So thank you for the question, it's a wonderful question.
Not to that.
Somebody do a chance.
I know Dr. Kahler and everybody in this room must be asking themselves, why? Why is Biden and really the rulers of this country as a whole, why are they waging this genocide despite their profession of democracy and concern for human rights? It isn't because they don't know. And I talked to Dr. Ahmed a couple of weeks ago, and he said, with the internet, nobody can say they don't know what is going on in Gaza. Nobody. And it is because the U.S. is the top imperialist power in the world. The Middle East is the most strategic part of the world, and Israel is the U.S.'s attack dog in the Middle East, has been for 75 years, has been since the inception of Israel. Every administration, Democrat and Republican, has supported Israel. There's a revolutionary leader named Bob Avakian. He said, we can no longer afford to let these imperialists dominate the world, even to the point where there needs to be a revolution in this country, which is the biggest danger to humanity right now. I would like to get some comments on that.
I can try. Okay, can you hear me this time? Okay. Cool. No, I'm just processing what you said first. As you were speaking, or right before, I got a New York Times alert. I've only read the alert, so forgive me if I'm getting any information wrong, but it says, Israel agreed to open another border crossing to allow more aid into Gaza, the White House said, after pressure from President Biden. So what was the nature of that pressure? According to the White House this afternoon, President Biden called Netanyahu and gave him sort of the sternest talking to that he's given him yet. I don't even know what that means. But the key line in the press release, the readout says that President Biden said that future U.S. policy towards Gaza would be determined by Israel's respect for human rights, humanitarian aid. And that's the closest that the president has come to conditions on military aid to Israel. And that, to me, it's kind of the gold standard. That's what forces changes. So my understanding of history, remind me your last name, Kahler, recommended the book, The Day in the Life of Abed Salama. Nathan Thrall, the author, also wrote a book called The Only Language They Understand. The main essay in that book is about the history of US presidents calling Israel and saying, you are not getting our money unless you do what we want. Whether that is, in the case of Ronald Reagan calling Menachem Begin during the war in Lebanon and saying, stop the bombing, and he did. Well, first he stopped only part of it, and then Reagan called him back 2 hours later and said, I see you didn't stop. And he said, okay, and then he stopped. George H.W. Bush threatened to withhold loan guarantees for Israel to resettle Soviet Jewish immigrants in the late 1980s. He conditioned that money on Israel attending a peace conference, just showing up to the Madrid peace conference, which didn't yield anything, by the way, at the end of the day. That worked. Jimmy Carter basically got the Camp David, Israel, Egypt, and you can think whatever you want about the policies that they were pursuing. I happen to think that they disenfranchised Palestinians. I happen to think that the Oslo process is a trap that has left us in a status quo that keeps the Palestinians from freedom. But you can't deny that when presidents call the prime minister of Israel and say, you're not getting our money unless you do what we want, they're batting 1,000. It's what works. It's what appears to have worked this afternoon. So my question is, why didn't President Biden do that 6 months ago? And I think when people say he could end this with a phone call, you look at that history, that appears to be true. So maybe he kind of hints at conditions. Even that was enough to open a crossing. What if he actually called Netanyahu and said, you're not getting any more money from us ever until the war ends, until you withdraw from Gaza, until you ease the siege, until you allow unimpeded access for humanitarian aid, until you allow Palestinians to have elections without interference, until you stop settlement expansion, until you sit down for talks. Like, what's stopping him from saying that, and what's stopping Netanyahu? Yes, that's the answer to the question.
Call the Easter Bunny. This is never happening.
Right. But that was what would work, and there are big interests. AIPAC, the Democratic Majority for Israel, that in recent years have started to put a ton of money into primaries, and their real red line is anyone that gives any sort of credence to maybe we should put conditions on military aid to Israel. So for example, in Southern California, there was just a race where AIPAC, Super PAC, known as the United Democracy Project, which I think is a misnomer, put $5 million spent against this candidate named Dave Min. Dave Min is progressive in the California state legislature. He's not called for a ceasefire. He's not called for a permanent ceasefire. However, according to the reporting, Jewish Insider, I think, has some of it, he filled out a survey. These groups ask you to create a position paper. And he said, they asked him, will you not support any conditions on military aid to Israel? And his answer to the question was, I will not single out Israel. So it sort of left the door open to, I would support conditions that apply to all countries that maybe would also apply to Israel. And they said, will you edit that? And he said no. And then they spent $5 million to try to defeat him. Just because of that. This guy hasn't even called for a ceasefire. So that's what people are afraid of, because I think the folks that are in the pro-Israel community are invested in maintaining that status quo, because they know that presidents are batting 1,000 when they tell Israel you're not getting the money. So Joe Biden can end this with a phone call. He chooses not to. I think some of that has to do with U.S. interests in the region. I think some of that has to do with like this myth around Israel, this compelling narrative that I was taught to some extent growing up about Israel rising from the ashes of the Holocaust, about being the beacon that keeps Jews safe. It can really hit you in the heart, and I think that has blinded him, and maybe he intellectually has empathy for Palestinians, but when it comes down to making a decision, it seems like every single time he's going to choose whatever he thinks is most important for the so-called preservation of Israel, and that includes at the expense of the prevention of genocide. And he can stop it anytime, and he's chosen not to, and it's unconscionable in my view.
Isn't the Netanyahu is trying to prolong the war and keep the whole thing going to keep himself politically?
That's also a factor, yes. Yeah.
That's a big. He's not going to stop war if he's going to lose power.
Well, do you think, I was struck by Barack Obama when they were doing the Keystone XL pipeline, and he could change the dynamic with a wave of the pen, and he said, make me do the right thing. He wanted a movement to push him and to give him the cover to do that. And this is a, quantumly bigger deal from a foreign policy standpoint, but there's 50,000 people in Wisconsin who didn't sign a ballot that a state he won by 20,000 votes last time, and the same thing just happened in New York, and comparisons are inexact, but Lyndon Johnson had his Vietnam, and if you don't negotiate these things right, they kill you.
Yeah, well, and I'll use this one. Mehdi Hassan, the great former host at MSNBC, writer, journalist, said, I can't believe that Joe Biden is willing to lose the election to Donald Trump for Netanyahu, essentially, in order for Israel to be allowed to continue. Is it working? Hello? Yeah. In order for Israel to be allowed to continue genocide. It doesn't make political sense at this point that huge percentages of voters want a ceasefire, more than the margin of victory in many swing states. People have shown up and voted uncommitted. So it seems like he really believes in what he's doing, but we are seeing a sea change a little bit. I think the uncommitted campaign, you'll notice that Kamala Harris came out the Sunday after the uncommitted campaign in Michigan and said we need an immediate ceasefire. Now we know that when they say that, they're talking about immediate ceasefire for 6 weeks, which is dressing on a humanitarian pause. But the fact that she, and then later the president in the State of the Union, thought it would be beneficial to use that language speaks to the fact that they are feeling pressure. And just this morning, Senator Chris Coons, who's from Joe Biden's home state of Delaware, pretty moderate Democrat in the Senate, said in an interview, maybe this was a couple days ago, that he would be willing to explore conditions on aid to Israel. And he also made a point of saying, I've never gotten to that point before. So I'm hoping that the movement that Jerome, you referenced, is gonna push that, but we can't stop until it happens, and it should have happened months ago, and we can't forget all the people that were lost.
Biden isn't just refusing a ceasefire, he is fueling this war. He is asking for $100 billion from Congress. For what? Israel, Ukraine, and Taipei. In other words, more weaponry, including nuclear weapons, to go head-to-head with Russia, head-to-head with China, and we all know Israel is a nuclear power, okay?
He is ramping up around the world. It is not about elections. That was the point. Every president has supported Israel because it is an attack dog. We haven't even talked about Israel, the missile attack on the Iranian embassy in Damascus. Hello? What are we waiting for? Another match to blow up? It is not elections. And frankly, whoever gets in, the Republican fascists are arguing nuke him now. I don't hear a lot of outcry about that. I think that what you are doing is terribly important. I do. I think the split in the Jewish community, some of us were out in the streets in 2014, very lonely. You could count on two hands the number of people not from the Middle East that were out there. It's wonderful. So I'm not saying this, I recognize what you're doing. And I think that going up against your family and your tradition and your religion is its own kind of courage. So, but I think we have to get clear on the nature of the beast here. It is imperialism. They are, whoever is in power. And if we don't get serious about confronting that, and sure, it's a long shot revolution, but these are the times when institutions up and down are split where it could happen. So if that appeals to anyone, please talk to us afterwards. Thank you.
There's a lot of pointing going on.
I'm good. I'm not going to say anything about the politics because I'd foam at the mouth. You know, the fact is what Israel is doing.
Can't hear.
Entirely intended to demoralize the Palestinian people and to steal more land. So anyhow, but that's the politics. But doctor, what I want to ask you is when you go back, what do you need from us? What can we give you to go back?
The most banal answer, obviously, is money. It's banal, but it's important. There really isn't until there's a ceasefire and it's safe for people to actually come. Until there's a real ceasefire and it's safe for people to actually come, you can't come with us. And you might be able to, because I have the bomb and everything.
Can't hear.
People can't come. So I would advise there are organizations that are helping get people out. I would certainly give money to those. More probably even than to the medical organizations. These are actually helping people get out. Both those who want to get out and those who need to get out. But other than that, I'm not a religious man, so I won't say give me your prayers. But I think financial support and certainly support all of the discussion around the politics, of course. But I think you're asking something more direct.
What are those organizations that are helping people?
I will make sure that whoever has the list of, who does this list, will get the names on the list. So I can give you a couple who I support personally, but I like to do it.
We've got little QR codes for MedGlobal up here if you want to access their website and things. Mary's Church is doing a fundraiser for them.
Yeah, thank you. Before I say anything about fundraising, I of course want to acknowledge the tragedy that we have been listening to for the past hour and a half, and appreciate everything that you have shared with us as eyewitness accounts. We're all very moved by what's happening, and I will speak for myself that I'm at a loss to know which way to go first. And I'm a healthcare provider. I'm used to diving in and doing what needs to be done, and it's really hard to figure that out right now. But the one thing I know for sure that we can do is we can support the people who are doing the hard work and are the courageous folks trying to address this problem. And to what Jerome had said earlier, I'm from the Unitarian Church of Evanston. We're having a major fundraising push for MedGlobal, along with Doctors Without Borders, World Central Kitchen, and a Palestinian children's organization. So I've been handed the MedGlobal paper that has the QR code. I'm happy to pass it out to everyone. Obviously, every dollar counts, and you can clearly hear that whatever you donate is going to be put to very good use for folks who are in very desperate situations. Thank you very much.
Back there, there's a black container, so if you don't want to take this with you and do it at home, you can drop some money or whatever in this container on the door there.
More pointing, more pointing.
Here? Hi?
Can't hear you.
For the young gentleman who's tonight, I would say it's very important to remember how much music that we do need in the world to affect change and peace. And you might think about composing something for the people, and that could also raise money. Don't ever let the big language politics move the artist out, because artists keep it.
No, I think it's an important point. I mean, the question is never, do you like music? It's what kind of music do you like? I've never met someone that doesn't like music, and I'm also a music school graduate, so it turns you into a snob, I'd say. So I've been to too many movement events where it's just a bunch of people singing out of tune, and it just really grinds my gears. So to have like really good quality movement music is something I'm passionate about for sure.
Yeah, I have a question. And if you hold it close like this, you can be heard. I have a question and a point. The question is, to the doctor, what's your assessment of other doctors who are opposed to a ceasefire in Gaza? And the other issue is the elephant in the room. Until you start to openly challenge Zionism's claim that it represents Jews and reject the accusation that you're anti-Semitic because you say it's antithetical to Judaism and it's going to destroy the religion of Judaism and threaten our democracy right here under the rubric that to challenge what it does is anti-Semitic. That's something we need to talk more about, more people are talking about. But doctor, is your impression of other doctors who are refusing to call for a ceasefire?
Doctors can be as stupid as anybody else. And so I have absolutely no more intelligent argument than that with them. If a physician doesn't have enough humanity in them to understand that a ceasefire benefits all, then I don't know what else to say to them. I apologize, I don't have anything more to say. And I agree with you on the anti-Semitism.
I probably, of course, I always apologize before I ask a question, but I really, it might be off the subject. I was 9 years old when World War II ended, and was a reader of Life magazine. I saw what had happened, and the victims of the basically the Nazis was in the millions. I know the young man, the young pianist, said mentioned in a sort of scornful way that you know, the Jews say the Israelis say that they're the answer to the Holocaust, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't want to even pretend that I could get right what you said. But I can't get out of my head that the violence the horrible violence that was done during World War II, the chickens are coming home to roost. And I'm looking at, I'm looking at what is happening now, and these chickens will also come home to roost. And the thing spirals out of control, as though it did spiral out of control in the Holocaust. So I'm wondering if anybody still looks at what's going on today and draws a conclusion about what's happening now based on what happened 75 years ago. It's a question, that's a question.
The short answer is yes. The scornful thing you're talking about, I mean to direct that scorn towards the idea that the solution to an enormous refugee crisis of millions of people and a world historic genocide I'm directing scorn at the idea that the solution to that is to then steal someone else's land. But not, of course, full respect and honor to the victims of the Holocaust. And we're taught never again. And in the Jewish community, there's a debate about what does never again mean. It doesn't mean that in order, and I've actually seen Jews that I know, I've seen Jews that are of my political persuasion on the left say that never again means never again for anyone, and it also means that genocide doesn't happen overnight. You couldn't walk in and kill a bunch of people that you haven't already dehumanized without consequences. But if you have a gradual process of dehumanization that desensitizes people, that's what happened to the Jews of Europe. It didn't start with the gas chambers, it started with the Nuremberg laws and the Yellow Stars and so forth. And that's the process that has enabled the genocide in Palestine to happen. But what that also means is that you have to be on the lookout to know the signs. You have to stop it in its tracks. So when we say never again, that doesn't mean that what's happening in Gaza is as bad as the Holocaust. I don't think those comparisons are useful. What it means is that we want to prevent it from getting worse. We want to prevent a genocide. We want to end the genocide that's already happening. And so to invoke the memory of the Holocaust to me is a way to honor the spirit of never again, to honor the people who passed away in the Holocaust. Now there's another group of people that I've seen that say actually the Hamas attack being the greatest number of Jews that have been killed in one day since the Holocaust, that therefore this is the biggest threat to the Jews since the Holocaust, and never again means we have to protect ourselves against another Holocaust. So I've heard someone say never again is now in relation to preventing genocide in Gaza. I heard someone say never again is now in relation to protecting Israel from Hamas. And you can guess, which comparison I believe is the right one.
Hello? Yeah, I guess another way to think about it is generational trauma. And in fact, that is the way to think about it. And so and that's why, when you say, I hate the idea of coming home to roost, because that's not, it's generations of people who were killed and driven from their homes, and that's what's happened in Palestine as well. And that's why I really also, like Dr. Kahler, I worry and feel a little hopeless, because what have we've already created the generations of Palestinians that have been traumatized.
I have two questions, one for Dr. Kahler and one for all three of you. I'll start with the most difficult. The question regarding unconditional allyship between the U.S. and Israel. And it brings me back to a book that I know you are familiar with, in 2008, The Israel Lobby, which of course consists a very important part about our Christian Zionists. I wonder if you
can't hear you.
I'm nearly touching it with
They
my
can't.
lips.
I think it's more about where you are in the room than.
Regarding the unconditional allyship between the U.S. and Israel, which is really unique in history. And I'm thinking of the book, The Israel Lobby, published in 2008, in the spirit of not avoiding difficult conversations. I wonder if you have, that's a question for all three of you, comments, a question for all three of you. What can we do about that? How can we remain respectful for the rights of Israel while also countering the Israel lobby here on the domestic front? And the second question I have is for Dr. Kahler, very specifically. Earlier when we were talking about meeting the needs and the psychological needs of everyone and the babies, I'm reminded when I think of sort of birth with dignity, life with dignity, and death with dignity. And with 40,000 deaths, I would imagine the numbers are much higher. We don't know the numbers. How are people dealing with burials and death? So one question for the three of you and one question for Dr. Kahler. Thank you. Thank you, Jonah.
There is no death with dignity in Gaza. There's only death. Even though Chandler could speak to that, there is no death with dignity. There are mass graves. There are immediate burial. Remember, these are religions that bury their dead within 24 hours after cleansing them. It doesn't exist. This is the cleansing of ethnic cleansing. Remove the story, remove the people, remove the history. There is no death. And I don't know how to address the other.
I don't know. I'm not sure what you want me to say about the John Mearsheimer and Stephen Walt book, but it is funny that it's 2008. That was a long time ago. We're kind of inching along, and but I thought they did establish a vocabulary and an argument, and sustained a vocabulary and an argument that was, not anti-Semitic. That was an argument. They're realists. They have a hard foreign policy idea that they think is a problem and goes against their, goes against U.S. interests. And they made an argument that was it is almost is like one Jonah makes today. It's out there, and it's it doesn't come out of politicians' mouths. It has nothing to do with politicians' mouths. I don't know how that works, but do you want to say something now?
Yeah, just a little. Oh wow. Maybe it's just because I'm like sitting in the center of the room. I'm not sure. You mentioned the Christian Zionist support for Israel. Of course, we have a two-party system with two very polarized parties, and I think most of Republican support for Israel can be accounted for by the Christian Zionist evangelical lobby. I think, you could say the same thing about Donald Trump. Like, those evangelicals, they think he's a terrible person, but if he does the right thing to them on abortion in Israel, then those are like their ride or die issues. Can people hear me if I just talk like this? Yeah. So I don't think that the Christian Zionists have a huge influence on the Democratic Party, but they do lock the Republicans into their position for sure. In terms of what you mentioned about like opposing those groups and supporting the rights of Israel, I support the rights of the Israeli people, like all people, to like live in dignity and security, basic human rights, democracy. I think that's essential. I don't think any solution that proposes that people that have put down roots there leave the land because they're somehow on stolen land. I don't think the solution to one ethnic cleansing is another ethnic cleansing. So, but I don't necessarily support the rights of like the state of Israel as an entity, because the state of Israel is, if you look at the history, in 1948, there was a partition plan that the UN put together that proposed to give the Jews who lived in Israel, who at the time were, I believe, 30% of the population, they only owned 10% of the land. It proposed to give them more than half the land, and the Palestinians would get less than half the land. And not only that, but in the Jewish part, there was barely a sustainable Jewish majority. And so in order to effectuate the existence of the state of Israel, it literally required, because Israel requires a Jewish majority in its current form, it required the mass displacement, expulsion of Palestinians. Like, it wasn't possible without that. And when I learned that, which I didn't really fully understand until later in college, that was kind of like the death knell for my Zionism. And so we have to move from a place of shared humanity. I think that's essential. But I actually don't think that like the state of Israel is about shared humanity. It's about like rights for Jews and not for anyone else, which maybe is like keeps Jews safe in the short term. But if October 7th, I think, tells us anything, it's actually you can't keep people under your thumb without expecting them to fight back, and that doesn't, of course, at all justify the actions of October 7th. But people that are occupied resist occupation, and sometimes it's in nonviolent forms, and sometimes it's in violent forms, and sometimes it's in the form of war crimes. But that doesn't change the underlying issue. And so I think it's absolutely possible to oppose the influence of this money in our politics, because the main thing they're fighting for is unconditional military aid to Israel. I don't know that that's really doing that much to keep the Jews of Israel safe. So I'm not concerned that fighting against AIPAC, fighting against Christians United for Israel is going to like threaten the safety of the people of Israel. And if I did, then I would like give it a second thought and think about how would I do. But I just don't. I don't think like more supporting money for more bombs is keeping anybody safe.
I'm looking for a way to voice in public my anger and horror for what's going on. Is there any activity that's visible on an ongoing basis? I'll go out every day if I have to. This is just horrible. My parents were in the Holocaust. My brother Norman Finkelstein was very well known. I'm just horrified, and I feel I have to do something. So in any organization, we're all doing anything on a regular basis to voice our anger.
There's a protest tomorrow.
Sure.
Al-Quds is an international day demanding freedom for Palestine, and it's every year, and again this year, Friday, the last Friday of Ramadan, is going to be in front of the Israeli consulate, and then they will march to Daily Center. A lot of different groups, including some that I'm affiliated with, are co-sponsoring it. Usually it's a couple hundred, I hope it'll be a couple thousand, but really every weekend there's protests in the usually downtown. Yeah.
Is that one?
If
What
you're
time?
on social media, I can give you a couple accounts to follow. It's really important.
There was an announcement that's at 1.
And you mentioned you're Jewish. You know, I'll just give another quick plug for both IfNotNow and Jewish Voice for Peace, two non-anti-Zionist Jewish groups that we're planning Passover stuff. We've done direct actions, including at that very Israeli consulate with civil disobedience. We have art and action teams. We do civil disobedience. We do lobbying of Congress people. So there are lots of opportunities to get involved. If doing it as a Jew is important to you, both JVP and IfNotNow, I would recommend highly.
I would like to add a couple of points. Dr. Zahir habit of talking to the children, because once you go there, a lot of children come and talk to you, and he used to ask them, what do you want to be when you grow up? 95% of the children used to say they want to be doctors. Wherever we went, we talked to children, all of them, the mothers motivate them to become doctors so they could save their lives. Other thing, we interviewed a lot of people, what they're thinking about their future in Gaza. They're not scared of death. Their faith is so strong. They believe death is a judgment day. If they live their life, that they didn't hurt anybody, they will be rewarded accordingly. But what they're most fearful is the humiliation. The day we got evacuated, the same day, hundreds of healthcare workers. These are people who are displaced from the north of Gaza. Their houses have been bombed, they're not being paid, their families living in the tents, and they don't have food. We got one meal from World Central Kitchen every day. Me, Kahler, and Zavin, we used to share that one plate. And we all came back a little bit in a healthier weight. So they're not scared of death. They're scared of the humiliation. They're seeing these men taken in trucks in the underwear and they disappear. Even now, there are 70 healthcare workers taken from Nasser Hospital. We don't know where they are. That includes the chief of surgery. I know 9 doctors we work with. We don't know their fate. One of the doctors, an anesthesiologist, he lives in Rafah. He texts me every week. One of the doctor's wife has delivered a baby, and she wants to see her husband. She wants her baby to see the father. And Red Cross has no idea where these people are taken. And nobody knows there's no registration of these healthcare workers.
And Al Shifa, we know what happened, but this whole central kitchen incident has suppressed that news. But that's like a John Hopkins, a Mayo Clinic, or Cleveland Clinic. A major premier institution has been completely demolished, right? But these are very dignified people, very resilient. They try to give you the one meal they have to share with you before they eat. And it's really a human to human. Remove all other variables there, religion, politics, nationality. We can all do better for another human being.
We're gonna have a closing word because they're gonna throw us out of the library. That's what we want, right? Here's Catherine with a closing word.
I just want to say, until there is a ceasefire, we don't have a lot of tools, but what we've been asking our members to do is to call and write the senators, both of them, and call and write our representatives and say something different every time you call. There's so many things to say to them. But by all means, anytime you talk about the hostages, please add, they must free the prisoners.
Yes. Yes.
Every time they say hostages, you say prisoners too, Palestinian prisoners. All those men need to go back to their families.
And children and women.
Hey, guys, thank you so much for student chapters at Loyola. You can go to our website, Chicago Area Peace Action, and you can see the stuff. Thank you.
Pleasure.